Music theory with OneNote. Scales built by negative intervals or modal distance. In other words, traveling in the counterclockwise or negative direction, looking at the minor modes, those being the Aeolian mode, otherwise known as the minor scale, the Dorian mode, and the Phrygian mode. We're even throwing in the Locrian mode as well. So get ready and some coffee, because although we're just playing with one note, it's a beautiful note. You're not required to, but if you have access to it and would like to follow along, we're currently in the OneNote file of Modal Node System, MNS Presentation 1329, OneNote scales built by negative intervals or modal distance, minor modes, and Locrian. List of presentations, which we plan on adding plenty more to shortly. Also noting, within this OneNote presentation, we'll spend our time on the music theory side of things. However, we have another similarly named and numbered presentation where we build these tables in Excel, practicing our Excel music and table visualization skills all at the same time. We're continuing our discussion of intervals, this time going once again in the counterclockwise direction, but focusing in on the minor modes and the Locrian. Going in the counterclockwise direction being something that most people are very unskilled at. Why? In part because our naming conventions are all messed up. So let's get an idea of the optimal way to visualize the fretboard and how we can shoehorn our current naming convention and think about other naming conventions that would be more optimal. We want to visualize the fretboard as a map of the territory, like the globe has 7 continent or destination locations on it, 5 non-continent equivalent to ocean locations that we want to go through to get to the destination locations. Our head is up in space, above the fretboard, above the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling, and we can envision the fretboard spinning around like the globe is spinning around, the continents staying in the same relative position as compared to each other, but spinning from our perspective in space. And we assign it 12 degrees of rotation, which lines up to the 12 notes in the musical alphabet, typically working in the 4th degree of rotation or the 7-note collection around the C major. We could go to C sharp, we could go to D, we could go to D sharp. That would just mean the whole thing would be shifting. All the continents would still stay relative to each other. Therefore, once we determine the 7-note collection that we want to be working with, I no longer want to name it by note name, that's inefficient, but rather by the equivalent of continent names, which would be like the Nashville number system, if you're familiar with that, which simply is giving an absolute unchanging numbering system to the modes. So the 1 would be the Ionian, the 4 would be the Lydian, the 5 would be the Mixolydian, and so on and so forth. Once we have that, then we want to be able to measure the distances primarily between the continents, to the oceans as well, but primarily I'm concerned how far is it to go from continent to continent from each of the nodes, of which there are 7 in our system. So if I'm on the Ionian, I want to get up to the Phrygian, that's 2 continents up. I have 2 types of measuring methods, one being modal half steps or continent hopping, 2 continents up, which is equivalent to scale degrees, but you make this the 1/3 scale degree. So what's the distance in continents and oceans or notes to get to 2 continents up, 2nd modal half step or 3rd scale degree, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 notes up or 4 continents and oceans? What about if I go from Mixolydian and I want to go 2 continents up or 2 modal half steps or the 3rd scale degree? Is it the same distance in notes or continents and oceans? Yes, it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. But if I went on the Aeolian and I want to go 2 continents up or 2 modal half steps up or the 3rd scale degree, then it's only 1, 2, 3 continents up. Those are the comparisons we want to be making. But this time we're going in the counterclockwise direction. So if I want to go back from the Ionian 2 continents, you would think that would be the 3rd scale degree in the negative direction, negative 3rd scale degree if you made that the 1, but the scale degrees completely fall apart. So that's part of our problem with the naming convention. It would be 1, 2, 3, 4 or negative 4 steps counterclockwise. So we want to recognize that there is such a thing as directionality. We're going around the block, visualizing we're going around a racetrack. we can either go clockwise or counterclockwise, but we can't go counterclockwise, and we need something for that direction. So now we're going in the counterclockwise direction, primarily looking at the minor modes. So we want to be looking at the Aeolian first, because that's the main minor, that's the minor scale, and then compare the Dorian to it as well as the Phrygian to it, because they're going to be very similar in nature. And then we can also compare the Locrian, the crazy Locrian, which is going to be similar to the minors, although it's going to have two different intervals instead of just one different interval to the Aeolian, the Locrian being more similar to the Phrygian, but it has that crazy 6-note away, flat 5 or 4th modal half step. All right, so last time we did this looking at the Ionian modes. Now we're going to be moving up to the Aeolian. So we'll do this one at a time, going all the way across through all the modes, comparing to the Ionian, to the main minor, the Aeolian, and then going through to the Dorian and the Phrygian, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's first look at the Aeolian here. So we're going to go back one. So remember, going forward, this is what most people only kind of work with, is going clockwise, which means you'd have scale degrees 1 through 7. Modal distances, which is the more proper measurement, would be 0 through 6. And then if we go forward from that point, that would be kind of like we're on the Aeolian and we have a compass. So we put our compass to draw a circle, except this isn't exactly a circle. We're going to measure the shape around this point. And going clockwise would be measuring the shape going forward, or you can imagine going down on the fretboard towards the higher pitched strings. Now we want to measure the shape going backwards or up towards the lower pitched strings, right? And that's going to mean that we're going to have to go in the counterclockwise direction, in essence, is one way that you might try to visualize this. So we can see going forward from the Ionian, if we measure around clockwise, we have a 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 6, 1, 7 modal range. Here's going to be our distances. Here's our distances in the normal terminology. Here's our modal distance. If we do the same thing for the Aeolian, going clockwise, we'd have an AA, an AN, an AI, Aeolian to the Ionian, Aeolian to the Dorian, Aeolian to the Phrygian, Aeolian to the Lydian, Aeolian to the mixed Lydian, or a 6-6, a 6-7, a 6-1, a 6-2, a 6-3, a 6-4, a 6-5 modal range. Here are the distances from each of those points for the Aeolian. This is going to be the midpoint because it's going nowhere. We stayed on the Aeolian. Now we're going to say, what if I go one continent back from the Aeolian? Let's go ahead and draw that out. So let's say we're going to make this a green. Let's make it a green one. And we'll draw out backwards from the Aeolian. So we're going to go, let's go from this Aeolian and say we're going to go one counterclockwise or backwards. So then we'll say, let's go back to the pointer up top. That's going to land us on the Mixolydian. So with the Mixolydian, one continent back gets us to the Mixolydian. So that's going to be one step counterclockwise or one modal half step backwards. And that's going to get us to an AX modal range because the Aeolian is the 6. And so 6 minus 1 would be the 5. So it'd be a 6-5 modal range, one modal half step back, which you would think would be the negative second scale degree if we had negative second scale degrees, but we typically don't use those. And that's going to be 2 note half steps backwards. So what do we call that? Typically it's a 2-note away minor 7. Why? Because 12 minus 2 would be 10 notes going forward, which is a minor 7. Therefore, a minor 7 could be 10 forward or 2 in the counterclockwise direction, but it would be better called a 2-note away from the Aeolian node, negative first modal half step. So negative 2-note away from the Aeolian node, negative first modal half step. Why? Because going forward, it would still be 12 clockwise, but 7 minus 1 gives you the going forward direction or clockwise direction of 6. So a 10-note away Aeolian 6. See how this makes sense? You go backwards or counterclockwise around the block using the 2 measurement methods from the node we're on, Aeolian. This one goes clockwise around the block. So in other words, we can go back from the Aeolian to here, or if I was on this Aeolian, we go forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 forward, 6 modal half steps, which would be the 7th scale degree, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in terms of notes going forward. Let's go up here and say, let's make a red one and say if we were on the Ionian, so if I was on the Ionian and we went back, you will recall, it would be going Ionian back to the Locrian, boom, here. Let's make this one the pointer again. So that would be a 1-7 modal range. So it would be a 1 modal half step back, which would be the second scale degree, which would be the -1 note back, which would be a -1 note away major 7. So we have a difference here when we go back one step. I'd rather call it a -1 note away from the Ionian node, negative first modal half step. All right, let's go through all of them here. If I go to the Dorian, back on over to the Dorian, and let's say that we go back one step from the Dorian, we'd end up on the Ionian. Why? Because the Dorian is 2, Dorian minus 1 step would get us to 1, so it's a 2-1 modal range. Let's pick up another color here and say we're on the Dorian. And so if I go back to the Dorian, I'm going to kind of overlap them here, which is going to get confusing with a similar color too, but let me try. All right, I'm going to move the Ionian up here, and then we can look at the Dorian. So we're going back on the Dorian. So I'm going 1 modal half step back, or 1 continent back, which would be 2 notes or continents and oceans back, which would make sense because it's a minor mode. So if I go 1 modal half step back, that you would think would be the second scale degree. If we had scale degrees going backwards, it would be -2 notes going backwards, and then the name or the interval would be a -2 note away from the minor second, a -2 minor 7 for the same reason we saw before for the Aeolian. But I'd rather call it a -2 notes away from the Dorian node, negative first modal half step, because going forward, it would be 10 notes away from the Dorian, and 7 minus 1 would be 6, right? So if I went forwards here from this Dorian, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modal half steps, or the 7th scale degree, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 notes away. Okay, let's go to the Phrygian. So if we went to the Phrygian, which is also a minor mode, and we go backwards 1 continent or 1 modal half step back, we would get to the Dorian. Why? Because the Phrygian is the third from a natural number system. -1 would get you to the second. If I go 1 modal half step backwards, then that would be the -2nd scale degree. If we had those, it's going to be the notes back, 2 notes back. So that's going to be then, once again, a -2 minor 7 for the same rationale. I'd rather call it a -2 from the Phrygian node, a negative first modal half step. So from the Phrygian, let's go down here and then make another color. See if we have enough colors here. So I'll make this the light blue for the Phrygian. And we're saying we're going to go back from here to here. Okay, so that's going to be 1 modal half step back, and it would be -2 notes. What if I went forward from this Phrygian? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modal half steps forward, 7th scale degree, notes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 notes going in the clockwise direction. Okay, so if we do the Aeolian, we already looked at the Aeolian, but here it is again on the Aeolian. And then let's look at the Locrian. So if I was on the Locrian, which is not exactly a minor mode, it's a diminished mode, but it's more on the minor side than the major side. So you're going to say 1 step back, 1 continent counterclockwise. It's going to land you from the Locrian to the Aeolian. And that's going to be then a 7 is the natural number system for the Locrian. -1 gets us to the 6, so it's a 7-6 modal range going counterclockwise, and it has -1 continent backwards, or -1 modal half step, which would be -2nd scale degree. From a note half step, it would be -2 notes counterclockwise. We would call that once again a -2 minor 7. I'd rather call it a -2 from the Locrian node, -1st modal half step. So let's go ahead and map out the Locrian. So we'll say Locrian, we'll make that the crazy pink Locrian is going to be here. And we'll say boom, and we go back to here. It gets us to the Aeolian, negative 1 modal half step. If I was to go from this one forward, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modal half steps, or the 7th scale degree going forward. Notes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 notes going forward. All right, let's do the next one. We're going to go 2, if we go 2 back, then, or let's just do it this way. We're going to go from the Aeolian and we go 2 back. So let's first, if I look at the Ionian, if I go from the Ionian 2 back, I get to the Aeolian. And let's go ahead and make this one like a red or something, just so I can see this going across. So let's say we're going here, I'll just put that all the way across, and then I can move it up. All right, so we're going from the Ionian gets to the Aeolian. It's a 1/6 modal range, and now I can't see these because that one, let's bring it to here. It would be 2 modal half steps back, negative 3rd scale degree. Note half steps would be a 3 notes back, so it's a negative 3 major 6. Why? Because going forward be 12 minus 3, which would be 9. So I can copy this maybe and, oh, wait a sec. Undo. Let's copy it and put it down here. So going the other way would be 9. And that would be I'd rather call it a 9 note away from the Ionian 5th modal half step going forward. What about if I go to the Aeolian? So if I go from the Aeolian, I go back to, I'm going to land on the Lydian. Why? Because the Aeolian is 6, minus 2 continents would get me to 4. It's a 6/4 modal range. So it's a negative 2 modal half steps counterclockwise, which would be the negative 3rd scale degree. If we had negative scale degrees, it's going to be a distance of negative 4 note half steps, which we would typically call then a negative 4 minor 6. Why? Because going forward would be 12 minus 4, which would be, and let's see if I can copy this again and say I put this one here. So if we were to go forward, it would be 12 minus 4 would be 8, which would be a minor 6. So a minor 6 could be 8 forward, or it could be 4 going in the counterclockwise direction, but I'd rather call it something like a negative 4 from the Aeolian node, negative 2nd modal half step, because the clockwise direction would still be 8, this time from the Aeolian node. 7 minus 2 would give me a 5 clockwise modal half step, which would be the 6th scale degree. So if we go down here, let's kind of move our cursors. If I was on the Ionian and I go back another continent, now we're going to go 2 continents or 2 modal half steps counterclockwise, which would be 1, 2, 3, negative 3 distance on the counterclockwise direction. So if I was going from the Ionian to go forward, then to get to the Aeolian, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps forward, or the 6th scale degree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in terms of half steps. So if I was on the Aeolian and we want to go another step back, so now we're going 1, 2 modal half steps in the counterclockwise direction. It's going to be 1, 2, 3. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 notes counterclockwise. If I was to go from the other direction, going clockwise, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 modal half steps or continents clockwise, or 6th scale degree notes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So an 8 note distance is on the minor side, right? And so if I was to go back on the Dorian, we'll bring this back here. And then so now I'm going 1, 2 back on the Dorian, 2 continents back. Let's go 2 continents back on the Locrian, 1, 2 continents back on the Locrian, and then we're going to go 2 continents back on the Phrygian, 1, 2 continents back. We'll get back to analyzing those. Let's check that out. Back from the Dorian. All right, so if we're on the Dorian and we go back 2, then we're going to land on the Locrian. It's a DN modal range going counterclockwise. Why? Because the Dorian is 2. 2 minus 2 gets us backwards, going backwards gets us to the 7 because it goes 1 and then back to 7. So it's a 2-7 modal range going counterclockwise. So if I go back 1 modal half step, that would be the negative 3rd scale degree. If we had negative scale degrees, which we don't typically, that's going to be negative 3 notes counterclockwise, which we would typically call then a negative 3 major 6. Now that's weird because you would think it would be on the minor side. This is where the Dorian has a different interval than the other minors. This is where it's closer to the major, the Dorian being closer to the major. If I take 12 minus 3, that gives me a 9 note away, which would be a major 6. Let's copy this. See if I can put that over here. A 9 note away, major 6. I'd rather call it then a negative 3 note away from the Dorian, negative 2nd modal half step, which going clockwise would be, once again, 9 note away, this time from the Dorian. 7 minus 2 would be a 5 modal half step. So let's go from the Dorian. If we go back 1, 2 modal half steps counterclockwise, 1, 2, 3 in terms of notes. If I go forward then from the Dorian, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 modal half steps going forward, 6th scale degree therefore. Notes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is where it is closer to the major than to the minor. What about the Phrygian? The Phrygian's a minor mode. So if I go 2 back counterclockwise, 2 continents back, I'm going to land on the Ionian. So what's the range? Well, Phrygian is 3 minus 2 gets me to 1. So it's a 3-1 modal range going counterclockwise. If I go 2 back modal half steps or continents back, that would be the negative 3rd scale degree. If we had negative scale degrees, it's going to be a distance of negative 4, which is back to the normal minor distance. So a negative 4 minor 6, because going forward 12 minus 4, let's copy this again. Copy and put that here to 2. And if I was to go forward, it would be then an 8 note away minor 6. So then the minor 6 could be 8 clockwise or 4 counterclockwise, but I'd rather call it then the negative 4 note away from the Phrygian node, negative 2nd modal half step, because going clockwise would be an 8 note away from the Phrygian node. 7 minus 2 would be a 5th modal half step. So if I go back from the Phrygian, we're on the Phrygian, and we're like, okay, where's the Phrygian? I thought I had it right here. Here it is. So we're going back 1, 2 modal half steps counterclockwise, which is 1, 2, 3, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 notes. If I go from this Phrygian clockwise or forward, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 modal half steps, which would be the 6th scale degree. Notes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's back to the normal distance for the minor, unlike the Dorian that went out of sync there. Then we have the Aeolian again, which we already did, so I'm going to skip that one. What if we go to the Locrian? If we go back from the Locrian, it's going to land us on the Mixolydian, an NX modal range, Locrian Mixolydian. Why? Because we're on the 7 minus 2, and 7 minus 2 gets us to 5. So that's going to be a 7-5 modal range. So negative 2 modal half steps counterclockwise, negative 2 continents backwards would be the negative 3rd scale degree. If we had negative scale degrees, which we typically don't, which would be negative 4 note half steps backwards, which once again is on the minor interval of a negative 4 minor 6 for the similar reasons. I'd rather call it a negative 4 from the Locrian node, negative 2nd modal half step. So if we're on the Locrian, we can say, okay, Locrian, crazy Locrian, 1, 2 backwards, negative 2 modal half steps back, 1, 2, 3, 4 notes back. If I went forward, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th modal half step going forward, which would be the 6th scale degree, notes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it has a distance similar to the minors, not the major. Okay, so let's go to the next one up. So if I go up to this one, and if we start on the Ionian, if we think about the Ionian, now we're going a modal distance of 3 back, which is going to be the scale degree of 4 if we had negative scale degrees. We would go from the Ionian back to the Mixolydian. That would be a 1-5 modal range. So we'd be going back 3. The scale degree would be negative 4. It would be a negative 5 note half steps, it would be a -5 note away perfect fifth, a -5 perfect fifth, and I'd rather call it a -5 Ionian -3rd modal half step. Now, why is it that? Because 12 minus 5 going forward would be a 7 note away perfect fifth. Therefore, a perfect fifth could be 7 clockwise or forward, or it could be 5 counterclockwise or backwards. This makes more sense because if I go clockwise, it would still be 7, but now from the Ionian node, and 7 minus 3 gives us 4 going clockwise. Let's compare that to the Ionian before we look at the map. So what if we go back then 3 from the Aeolian? We would land on the Phrygian. It would be an AP modal range. Why? Because the Aeolian is 6. 6 minus 3 would give us 3. It would be a 6-3 modal range going counterclockwise. So then we're going to say then that it would be the 4th scale degree if we had negative scale degrees, or -4 scale degree. And the note half steps would be 5 in the counterclockwise direction. So we would normally call that, again, a -5 perfect fifth, a -5 note away perfect fifth. It's the same distance for the Aeolian, and we want to note that by the distance. The -5, which if I was to go clockwise, would be 7. So 7 forward, -5 backwards is a distance found in most of the majors and the minors. Fairly stable distance that will land you on a continent if you start on a continent typically. So I'd rather call it a -5 from the Aeolian node, -3rd modal half step, because going forward, it would still be 7 going forward from the Aeolian node. 7 minus 3 would give us a 4 modal half step in the clockwise direction. So let's do this. If we go from the Ionian, if I go back another one, so now we're going 1, 2, 3 back. So -3rd modal half step, which has a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, gets us to the Mixolydian and IX modal range. If I was to go forward to the Mixolydian, and from this Ionian, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 modal half steps forward, 5th scale degree, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of total distance. What if I go from the Aeolian? I'm going to go back one more, so it's back 1, 2, 3, continents backward, -3 modal half steps. Distance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, total distance. If I was to go forward from the Aeolian, 1, 2, 3, 4 continents forward, 4 modal half steps forward or clockwise, which would be the 5th scale degree. Total distance in notes or continents and oceans, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's move the Dorian back one more. So now it's back 1, 2, 3 continents or modal half steps backwards. The Locrian, 1, 2, 3 continents or modal half steps backwards. And the Phrygian, 1, 2, 3 continents or modal half steps backwards. Okay, so let's go to the Dorian. All right, Dorian. If we go back from the Dorian, we're going back 3 steps. That'll land us on the Aeolian. It's a DA modal range going counterclockwise. And that's going to then be a 2-6 modal range, because if we start on 2 and we go backwards 3, and there's only 7 to go around the horn in, it's going to be 2, 1, 7, 6. Right? So it gets us there. We're going to say -3 modal half steps or continents in the counterclockwise direction, which would be -4 scale degrees if we had scale degrees. Distance, -5 note half steps. So we're going to call that a -5 perfect fifth once again. Going forward, it would be 12 minus 5 or 7 note away perfect fifth. So I'd rather call it a -5 from the Dorian node, -3rd modal half step, because going forward, it would be a 7 note away from the Dorian node, 4th modal half step. So if I take a look at that on the Dorian, so we went Dorian, 1, 2, 3 modal half steps backwards, distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, -5 distance backwards. If I was on this Dorian going clockwise or forwards, 1, 2, 3, 4 modal half steps forward, which would be the 5th scale degree, distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Same distance as the Ionian and the Aeolian. Okay, let's say we go to the Phrygian, and we're saying, all right, Phrygian, we're going to go back 3 continents or 3 modal half steps. That'll land us on the Locrian. So it's a PN modal range. That's a 3, 7 modal range, because the 3 minus 3, when I go backwards, doesn't get me to 0 because we didn't include 0. We go around the circle to 7, and that's going to be the negative 4th scale degree if we had scale degrees. And it's going to be a distance of negative 5 once again, which should be a familiar distance to us. And we're going to say, okay, that's a negative 5 perfect 5th distance, which I'd rather call a negative 5 from the Phrygian node negative 3rd modal half step, because going forward would be a 7 node away perfect 5th, or I'd rather call it a 7 node away from the Phrygian node 4th modal half step. So if I was to look at that from the Phrygian node, we go back 1, 2, 3 modal half steps backwards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes backwards. If I was to go forwards from this Phrygian or clockwise, 1, 2, 3, 4 modal half steps forward, which would be the 5th scale degree notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes forward. All right, what about if I go to, we already did the Aeolian, Locrian. We're going to go back 3 on the Locrian. Is the Locrian going to throw us off here? Crazy Locrian. You never know what they're going to do. You never know. It's going to be an NY modal range. So we're going to land on the Lydian from the Locrian. 7, 4, because if I go back 3 from 7, I get to 4. 7, 4 modal range going counterclockwise. Then it's going to be the negative 4th scale degree. If we had scale degrees going negative, which we typically don't, it's going to be a negative 6 note half step. Oh no, negative 6. That 6 distance in notes is always like, oh man, that's scary stuff. That's when Locrian got crazy. That's you knew it was coming. At some point, Locrian's going to go crazy. So it's a negative 6 note away, diminished 5th, because go forward would be 12 minus 6 would be 6. So it'd be a 6 note away clockwise, diminished 5th. I'd rather call it, though, a negative 6 note away from the Locrian node, negative 3rd modal half step, because going forward would be 12 minus 6, again, 6 note away clockwise from the Locrian, negative 4th modal half step. So this is where the Locrian, you thought that everybody's okay with this interval, but not Locrian. He's like, this is where craziness happens. So if I'm on the Locrian, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, negative 3 modal half steps backwards distance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the crazy distance. If I was to go forward from Locrian, 1, 2, 3, 4th modal half step, or 5th scale degree, if I make this the 1, distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, also 6, but going clockwise or forward, this going backwards. So don't get them confused. Okay, so then we're going to go then to the, so we went all the way through then. Let's go then to the next one. So we're going to go on up, moving on up to this one, and boom. Okay, so now we're going to go 4 modal half steps back, or which would be the negative 5th scale degree if we had those. So from the Ionian, that would be an IY modal range, or a 1-4 modal range, going back 4 steps counterclockwise direction. In modal half steps, which would be the negative 5th scale degree if we had those, negative 7 notes backwards, which would be a negative 7 perfect 4th, which is that way because 12 minus 7 would be 5, which we know is a perfect 4th. So a 5 note away perfect 4th. Perfect 4th could be 5 clockwise or negative 7 counterclockwise. I'd rather call it a negative 7 note away from the Ionian node, negative 4th modal half step, because it would still be 5 going clockwise, but it would be from the Ionian mode, and 7 minus 4 would give us a 3 modal half steps going clockwise. Let's compare that. We should say that that distance is a stable distance, so we should see that propagating itself throughout most of the other ones. Possibly even the Locrian won't go crazy on this one. So what if we go 4 continents back counterclockwise, modal half steps from the Aeolian, we land on the Dorian. That would be a 6-2 modal range, because 6 minus 4 would get us to the 2. If we go back 4, it would be the next negative 5th scale degree. If we had negative scale degrees, which we typically do not, it's going to be once again negative 7 notes counterclockwise, which we're going to call the same a negative 7 note away perfect 4th, same as we had with the major. So I'd rather call it a negative 7 note away from the Aeolian node, negative 4th modal half step, because going forward makes more sense of a 5 note away from the Aeolian node, 3rd modal half step clockwise. Let's check that out. If we go back from the Aeolian, negative 1, 2, 3, back from the Aeolian. Are we going back? We're going back 4. Let's do both of these. Ionian needs to go back 4, which would take it to here. So negative 1, 2, 3, 4 back on the Aeolian or Ionian would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total distance. If I was to go forward to get from the Ionian to the Lydian, it would be 1, 2, 3 modal half steps forward, or the 4th scale degree, and it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in terms of note distance. If I'm on the Aeolian, we're going to bring it back. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 modal half steps backwards or counterclockwise, which would have a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Same distance as with the major. If I went forward or clockwise from the Aeolian, 1, 2, 3 modal half steps forward, which would be the 4th scale degree, distance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, distance. Let's move the Dorian. So it's going back 1, 2, 3, 4 modal half steps back. Let's go to the Locrian, 1, 2, 3, 4 modal half steps back. And then the Phrygian, 1, 2, 3, 4 modal half steps backwards. Okay, let's go to the Dorian. Check it out. If we go back 4 from the Dorian, we'll land on the Aeolian. That's a dA modal range going counterclockwise. And wait, no, that's not right. We'll land on the Mixolydian. So it's a dx modal range going counterclockwise. That's because the Dorian is the 2. 2 minus 4 is going to get us to the 5 because it's going to go 2, 1, 7, 6, 5. And so then if we go 4 back, that would be the negative 5th scale degree. If we had negative scale degrees, which we typically don't, it's going to be, once again, negative 7 distance in notes in the counterclockwise direction, which will be a negative 7 perfect 4th, because going forward would be a 5 note away perfect 4th. I'd rather call it a negative 7 note away from the Dorian node, negative 4th modal half step, because going forward would be, once again, a 5 note away from the Dorian mode, but it would be 7 minus 4 or 3 modal half steps going forward. So let's go to the Dorian over here. Say, okay, if I go back from the Dorian, 1, 2, 3, 4. So negative 4 modal half steps back is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total distance. If we were to go forward, 1, 2, 3 modal half steps forward, which would be the 4th scale degree, total distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it is the same distance as with the major mode, as well as the main minor, otherwise known as the Aeolian. What about the Phrygian, another minor mode? We're going to go back 4. What does that get us? From the Phrygian gets us to the Aeolian. Why? Because the Phrygian is a 3. 3 minus 4 is going to give us 3, 2, 1, and then 7, 6. Going backwards, it's a 3, 6 modal range going counterclockwise. And we have the negative 5. If we had scale degrees, it's the same distance, negative 7. Negative 7 note away, perfect 4th, because going forward would be a 5 note away, perfect 4th. And I'd rather call it a negative 7 note away from the Phrygian, negative 4th modal half step, because going forward or clockwise would be 5 note away from the Phrygian, 3rd modal half step going forward. So if we're on the Phrygian, so we're going to say Phrygian goes back 1, 2, 3, 4 modal half steps back. Distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Going forward from the Phrygian, 1, 2, 3 modal half steps forward, which would be the 4th scale degree. If we made that the 1, total distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes. So same distance. We have a very consistent measurement that's happening all the way across the board thus far. We already did Aeolian. Let's go to the crazy Locrian. Is the Locrian going to throw us off on this one like they did with the other very solid and stable distance of 7 forward and 5 back? Well, if I go back 4 from the Locrian, I get to the Phrygian. It's an NP modal range, a 7-3 modal range, because we start at 7 minus 4 to get to the 3. And that then is going to be negative 5 scale degrees. If we had negative scale degrees, the distance is still 7. It's the same. Oh my goodness, not even Locrian went crazy on this one. Negative 7 perfect 4th going forward would be a 5 note away perfect 4th. I'd rather call it a -7 from the Locrian node, -4th modal half step, because going forward would be a 5 node away from the Locrian node, negative or positive clockwise 3rd modal half step. All right, let's count this out from the Locrian. So if we're on the Locrian, we go back 1, 2, 3, 4 modal half steps back, distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If we were to go forward from Locrian, 1, 2, 3 modal half steps forward, distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, going forward. Let's go back to the next one now. Let's first do our pull everything back. So we're going to go back another one, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -5th modal half step backwards. We'll do the same for the Aeolian, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll do the same for the Dorian, and we're going to say bring it back, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5 modal half steps. Same for the Phrygian, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5 modal half step. Same, that was for the Locrian and the Phrygian. -1, 2, 3, 4, 5 modal half steps backwards. And you can see we have a fairly consistent measurement in terms of total notes as we go backwards from all of our minor modes as well as the Locrian. So let's see how that plays out then. So we're going back here. We're going to go back 5, which would be the -6 scale degree. Let's pull these two up. So from the Ionian, if we went back 5, it would be landing from the Ionian to the Phrygian, a 1, 3 modal range. It's going to be 5 modal half steps back, which would be the -6th scale degree, -8 steps back, which would be a -8 major third. Going forward would be 12 - 8, which would be a 4 note away major third. So now we're looking at the one which is the defining characteristic of whether it's going to be major or minor. So you would expect consistency for all the minors and on all the majors for this particular interval. But most people see it going forward, 4 note away major third. It's also a -8 note away major third. If you see it that way, I'd rather call it an 8 note away from the Ionian node, -5th modal half step, because going clockwise would be still 4 notes away, but this time from the Aeolian node, 7 - 5 would be 2 modal half steps going forward. All right, the Aeolian then, if I go up 5 from the Aeolian, or back 5, I'm going to land on then the Ionian. I'm going to land on, is that what we're on? Yeah, I'm going to land on the Ionian. So that's going to be why, because we're on 6 - 5 is going to get me to the 1. It's a 6-1 modal range, an AI modal range. And that's going to be the scale degree. If we had negative scale degrees, -6th scale degree. And the note half steps are going to be 9. -9 distance, which is of course different than we had over here, -8. So what would we call that? A -9 minor third, because going forward, if I pull this up, would be 12 - 9 would be a 3 note away minor third. So the minor third could be 3 clockwise or forward, or -9 counterclockwise or backwards, but I'd rather call it a -9 note away from the Aeolian node, -5th modal half step, because going forward or clockwise, it would still be 3 notes away, but this time from the Aeolian node, and it would be the 2nd modal half step going forward. Let's check it out. So if I went from the Ionian, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5 modal half steps backwards, total distance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 distance backwards. Going forward to get to the Phrygian, if I was on the Ionian to get to the Phrygian, 1, 2 modal half steps going forward, or the 3rd scale degree, if I make this the 1, distance 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 note away major third. If I was on the Aeolian going backwards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 modal half steps backwards, distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Going forwards from the Aeolian, 1, 2 modal half steps going forward, or 3rd scale degree. If I make this the 1, 1, 2, 3 total distance going forward. So similarly for the Dorian, we'll do that later. Let's go through them one at a time here. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. If we go from the Dorian and we go back then 5, where's that gonna land us? From the Dorian, it gets us to the Lydian. It's a dy modal range, counterclockwise. Why? because the Dorian is 2 minus 5 gets us to 1, 7, 6, 5, 4. So it's a 2, 4 modal range. If I go back 5, it would be the negative 6 scale degree. If we had negative scale degrees, it's going to be a distance of negative 9, which is the same as the minor, which is what you would expect because that's the minor or counterclockwise distance that basically defines the scale as major or minor. And that's because if I go forward then, it would be 12 minus 9, which would be a 3 note away minor third. So a minor third could be 3 forward or 9 backwards, but I'd rather call it a negative 9 from the Dorian node, negative 5th modal half step, because going forward would still be 3 going forward, but this time from the Dorian node, negative 2nd modal half step. So if we were to count that from the Dorian over here, we're going to say it's going to go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 back. 5 modal half steps, which would be a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 backwards, going forwards from the Dorian. 1, 2 modal half steps forward, which would be the 3rd scale degree if that was the 1. Total distance 1, 2, 3 going forward. So of course that lines up to the minors. Phrygian should also line up to the minors because it's a minor mode. So if I go back 9 from the Phrygian node, I'll get to the Mixolydian node. We're going to call that a 3, 5 modal range because the 3 Phrygian minus 5 is going to get us to 5 because it's going to be 3, 2, 1, and then 7, 6, 5 because it goes around in the circle. And it would be the negative 6 scale degree. If we had negative scale degrees, it's going to be once again a distance of negative 9, which would be that negative 9 minor third, because going forward would be a negative 3 minor third. So the minor third could be 3 forward or negative 9 backwards. I'd rather call it a negative 9 from the Phrygian node, negative 5th modal half step, because going forward would be a 3 clockwise from the Phrygian node, and then 7 minus 5 would be a 2 modal half step clockwise. So let's go from the Phrygian node. So if we go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 modal half steps back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 distance going forward, 1, 2 modal half steps forward, 3rd scale degree. If I call that the 1 distance, 1, 2, 3 notes forward. How about the Locrian? It should be close to, it's similar to the minors. So you would think the Locrian would still be in line with the minors. It's going to be an N. If we go back 5 from Locrian, we get to the D, the Dorian. It's an ND modal range going counterclockwise, which would be a 7, 2, because if it's a 7, minus 5 gets us to the 2, 7, 2 modal range, back 5, which means it would be the negative 6 scale degree if we had those. And it would be negative 9 once again in terms of notes backwards. Negative 9 minor third, because going forward would be a 3 note away minor third. And so I'd rather call it a 9 note away from the Locrian node, negative 5th modal half step, a negative 9 note away from the Locrian node, negative 5th modal half step, because going forward would be a 3 note away from the Locrian node, 2nd modal half step going clockwise. Let's take a look at that from the crazy Locrian. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 modal half steps back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 notes back going forward, 1, 2 modal half steps going forward. If that was the 1, would be the 3rd scale degree going forward. Notes 1, 2, 3 notes going forward. Lastly, let's do the last one. We're going to go back 7. Let's see if I can pull this off without. Let's go back here. And if I was to go, let's pull all the numbers first. So if I was to go back from the Ionian, I could say there would be the Ionian, and I'm going to go back one more. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait a sec. That's not right. It would be, I'm just going to put it out here. We're behind the fretboard, but I'm just going to put it out here so I don't mess anything else up. Okay, so then let's say we're going to go back from the Aeolian. We're going to go back another one. So we'll go back to here. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 back. And then we're going to go back from the Dorian. That would be back to here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 back. We're going to go back from the Locrian to here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 back. And from the Phrygian back to here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 back. So from the Ionian, then if I go back 6, which would be the -7 scale degree. If we had that, we would land on the Dorian. That would be an ID modal range, a 1-2 modal range. So it'd be a 6 notes back, which would be the -7th scale degree. If we had those, distance would be -10. We would call that a -10 major second, because going forward would be 12 minus 10, 2 note away, major second going forward. I'd rather call it a -10 from the Ionian node, -6 modal half step, because going forward would still be 2 from the Ionian node this time, and then 7 minus 6 would be the first modal half step going forward. All right, let's compare that then to the Aeolian, the main minor. If I go back 6, then that's going to land me on the Locrian. So why? Because it's going to be a 6-7 modal range. 6 minus 6 is not getting me to 0, but to 7, because we're going around in the circle. If I go -6 modal half steps back, it would be the -7th scale degree. The distance then is going to be 10, -10 backwards in the negative direction. So if I move this up, that will then be a negative, well, let me do this first. This is going to be then a -10 note away major second. So this is that interval, which is the same on the minor as with the major. It still has a major distance to it. If I go forward, 12 minus 10 is still a 2 note away, which we call a major second. Same distance if we go from the Ionian or major scale. I'd rather call it a -10 note away from the Aeolian node, -6 modal half step, which would be going forward, a 2 note away from the Aeolian node, first modal half step going clockwise. So we took a look at it in the Ionian. Let's go to the Aeolian. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modal half steps backwards distance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Going forward from this Aeolian, first modal half step, which would be the 2nd scale degree. 1, 2 distance going forward in notes. Let's go from the Dorian. So if I go backwards 6 modal half steps from the Dorian, I will land on the Phrygian. Why? Because the Dorian is 2, minus 6 gets me to 1, and then 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. So 2, 3 modal range going counterclockwise. -6 would be -7th scale degree if we had negative scale degrees. -10 is the distance once again, which would be a -10 note away major second. And if we went clockwise, it would be a 2 note away major second. I'd rather call it, though, a -10 note away from the Dorian, -6 modal half step. So once again, this interval is the same with the Ionian, the Aeolian, and the Dorian thus far. We'll see a change on the Phrygian. So going forward, it would be a 2 note away from the Dorian, first modal half step. So if I go to the Dorian down here, we're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modal half steps back, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 distance. Going forward, first modal half step going forward, which would be the 2nd scale degree, 1, 2 total distance in notes. Let's go to the Phrygian. The Phrygian this is where the Phrygian will differ from the Aeolian. It's because it's more minor than the main minor. So we've got -6. If I go 6 continents back from the Phrygian, I land on the Lydian. That's going to be a 3-4 modal range, because 3 minus 6 counterclockwise is going to get us, and there's only 7, so it goes 3, 2, 1, 7, 6, 5, 4. It's going to give us a 3-4 counterclockwise modal range. That would be at the -4th scale degree, -7 scale degree if we had negative scale degrees. It's going to be 11 notes back, so we have a change here. So it's a -11 minor second. So it is the minor distance, so it's more minor than the main minor, which is the Aeolian. If we went forward, 12 minus 11 would be 1, which would be a minor second. So minor second could be forward 1 note or backwards -11 notes. I'd rather call it, however, a -11 notes away from the Phrygian node, -6 modal half steps, because going forward would still be 1 note, but it would be from the Phrygian node. 7 minus 6 would be 1 modal half step going forward. Let's take a look at that different interval on the Phrygian from the Aeolian and the Ionian. So it's going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modal half steps backwards, distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Going forward, one modal half step going forward is going to be the second scale degree, if we make that the 1, and it's going to be a distance of 1 note going forward. Okay? What about the Locrian? The Locrian is going to be like the Phrygian more so than the minor on this one. This is where the Locrian is more minor than the main minor, but it also went crazy with the flat 5. So if I go back 6 from the Locrian node, it gets me to the Ionian node. Why? Because it's going to be 7 minus 6 gets me to the 1. So 7, 1 modal range going counterclockwise. If we go 6 back, it would be negative 7 in terms of scale degrees. And that's going to be a negative 11 notes. So like the Phrygian, negative 11 minor second going forward would be a 1 note away minor second. I would rather call it, however, a negative 11 notes away from the Locrian node. Negative 6 modal half steps going forward then would be still 1 note away, this time from the Locrian node, and it would be 7 minus 6 or 1 modal half step clockwise or forward. Let's see that on the map. Back from Locrian, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modal half steps back, total distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Going forward would be 1 modal half step going forward. Second scale degree, if I make that the 1, it's going to be 1 note forward. Okay, so there it is. And just note that if you have this worksheet in Excel, you can then compare them possibly more easily. You can hide columns up top, possibly just wanting to look at the minor modes and compare them to each other, possibly including the Locrian, and just looking at the normal or the standard measuring tools. And you can see side by side, if I go 1 continent back, you've got a negative 2 note away, minor 7, minor 7, minor 7 across the board, which would be equivalent to 10 forward. If I was to go 2 continents back, then you have a negative 3 note away, major 6. This is where the Dorian is different than the Phrygian, the Aeolian, and the Locrian, which all are more on the minor side. This is where the Dorian does its major thing. And then if we go back to the 3 continents back, then you can see the Locrian is the weird one, the odd one out, because this is that very stable distance of negative 5, which going forward would be 7. So that's a stable distance that you would expect to follow through typically, generally, but the Locrian is the weird one on that one. If we go negative 7, that would be the same as 5 going forward, or clockwise 5, counterclockwise 7. Once again, a very stable distance, which is actually constant all the way through all the minors as well as the Locrian. It does fall apart or doesn't go through all of them because the Lydian on the major modes, as we saw before, has a weird interval there. If we go back 5, then we can see that we have a negative 9 distance all the way through. And that makes sense because going forward, that would be the third distance, which you would think would be the defining characteristic. And if we go back 6 continents, then you can see it's the Phrygian that is the odd one out. But the Locrian is there too, but it's not really a minor, so the Locrian is closer to the Phrygian than to the Aeolian. So we see the Aeolian, comparing the Aeolian to the other 2 minors, there's only 1 interval difference between the other 2, and then the Locrian is actually closer to the Phrygian, having 1 interval difference, which is quite distinct, that being the 5th, that 6 note away distance. And then again, you can do the same comparison with the other our measuring standard, and then you can compare all of them thusly. So if you have the whole thing in Excel and you can hide the columns, you can then look at the modal ranges in whatever format you prefer, by number or by letter. You can add the distances if you prefer and decide which ones you want to be comparing in terms of the measuring statuses. Compare the majors, the minors, compare whichever ones you want, put them side by side. It's quite versatile. There's a lot of combinations, more than you would think at first. So these are just a few ideas that you can check out.